Hi everybody, let's talk about the parts of HTTP. Now you will say, is there any part of HTTP too? Yeah, it has some parts. So let's talk about those parts. First part is the start line, then there are headers, then there is a blank line which is separating the header and the body. There is a body part also. There is a body. Okay, this blank line is only separating headers and body. Now I'll talk about every part in one separate video. There will be one separate video for every part. So in this video, I'm talking about only start line. So let's talk about start line a bit. If yeah. So what does start line contain? I'll talk about every particular part of HTTP in two contexts. In the context of request and in the context of response. If someone is requesting something and someone is getting the response back. So everything is happening because of HTTP. So what does HTTP start line contains when you are requesting something, and what does the HTTP start line contains when you are getting some response from that, let's assume the Google computer. Okay, so let's see what does start line contains, and I'll write start line, and then in front of that I'll also write the request and response part because I'll talk about both of them. So what does request contains and what does response contains? Let's see. Okay, start line contains HTTP version in the request part. So it will be like HTTP 1.1. It's famous, so I'm writing this one. So you can write any other version. So it contains the HTTP version in it. The start line contains the HTTP version, but in request side, it contains it in the request side. I'm not talking about response now. Okay. Now in the second part, what does it contains more? What does start line contains? It also contains the methods. You know what are the methods? It get, post, put, and then delete. These are all the methods. When I'm requesting something, I can request in these ways. These are all the methods. So let's now talk about what is a get method. If I want to read something on the screen, if I want to request some page to read it on my screen as an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript version, then I'll make a request of get method. I'll make a get request. That would be read. If I want to talk about if I want to talk about post, then what is post? Post is basically when I'm creating something new and giving the data to the let's assume Google computer. I'm sending some data to the Google computer so that it can create something for me. It can create something new. Now what is put? Put is basically we have something created of already, but we want to update it now. We want to update it. Okay, so that is put. We are just changing the data, so put also also includes some kind of data inside it. Now what is a delete method? Delete method is basically we're deleting something, so it's already there and we are deleting it. Okay, that's the method delete. In the language of database, you can also say this get, post, put, delete are called CRUD operations. And you will see this term a lot when you are talking about any backend, either it is Flask or Django or any other backend. You must be talking about this CRUD operations when you are doing any backend. So C means create, read, R means read, U means update, and D means delete. Isn't it what I told you before? It's the same thing. Create, read, update, delete. So it's called the CRUD operations in backend. Okay. In the language of databases, we call it CRUD. Now what else it contains? It contains methods, HTTP version, then it also contains folders and parameters inside it. You remember what are the folders and parameters? Let me remind you about that. See, what are the folders? Folders, see, and parameters, right? So if I write any particular URL, google.com, and then there is a search folder, and there is a query who is searching about CSS. What is the folder here? Folder is search. I told you that it's a Google computer and it has a folder named as search. And then what is parameter? Parameter is this query, Q. Q is the parameter. So where this part belongs to? This folder and the query, the parameter part belongs to the start line of HTTP. It belongs to the start line of HTTP. And also I'm talking about the request side, not talking about the response side, only talking about request side for now. So now you know what does HTTP start line contains in the request side. Now let's talk about the response side. What does start line contains in the response side? It contains the HTTP version in the response side too. It also contains it in the response side. So HTTP 1.1 will also be there in the response side, but it has something else in the response side which is called status codes. I think you know a little bit about the status codes. Now let me elaborate it. Okay, so what are the status codes? We have a lot of status codes. Basically, we have status codes which are starting with 1. So I'm just writing 1xx. You can fill it. You can either do 100, 101. There are a lot of them. So I'm just writing a basic generic syntax. Like why I'm telling syntax, but yeah, I'm just writing it generic. Uh, Generally how it will be written. One, every status code which is starting with 1, okay, I'll write it like this, okay, and 2xx, and then 3xx, there is a 4xx and the 5xx. 1xx means loading, okay, it's loading. 2xx means, what does it mean? Means success. My request is, I got my request, it succeeds. So we have a lot of 201 is created. So we created something. So it's success. 300. The line of 300 status code is for, what is it for? It means it got routed somewhere else. You can say, like path changed. You can say, yeah, path changed. And 4xx means there is a some client side error, like the errors from my side. If my internet is not working, that error will be counted in 4xx side. So that is the client side errors will be there in the 4xx, and the server side errors will be there in the 5xx. That will be the server side errors. Okay, now we know about all the status codes. So it will be there in the response side of start line. Okay, now you know what does HTTP start line contains both in the request and the response side. Okay, let's meet in the next video in which I'll tell you about the second part of HTTP, which is header.